I was just fixing her car on the side of the road, doing my job like any other night. Then she said one quiet sentence that stayed with me long after she drove away. I didn't know her name, her past, or her pain, only that something in both of us shifted in that moment. I thought I was helping her car. I had no idea I was about to change my life. My name is Bruce. I'm 36 years old. I work as a mechanic, and I live alone on the edge of a small town not far from the highway. I've been fixing cars most of my adult life. Engines make sense to me. They either work or they don't. People are more complicated. That evening started like many others. Late call, short temper, another driver stranded on the road. I grabbed my tools and drove out, already tired before I arrived. The car was pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking in the dark. A small sedan. Clean, but clearly neglected. When I walked up, I saw her sitting inside, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead like she was afraid to move. She looked up when I knocked on the window. Her eyes were red, not from crying right then, but from holding it in too long. She stepped out, apologizing too much, saying she didn't know what was wrong, that it just stopped. People always apologize when they're overwhelmed. Her name was Lily, 32. She told me that while I checked under the hood. The problem was minor. Loose connection. Something simple. But nothing about her felt simple. She stood a little distance away, hugging herself, watching me work like she didn't want to be in the way. I fixed the issue quickly. Too quickly, maybe. When you've done something 1,000 times, your hands move before your mind does. I closed the hood and told her it should be fine now. She thanked me, but didn't move. Just stood there, quiet, staring at the road. That's when she said it. I wish someone could fix my heart too. She didn't look at me when she said it. She said it like she was talking to the night, not expecting an answer. I froze for a second. I'm good with tools, not moments like that. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I gave her the bill, explained the repair again, like that would put things back where they belonged. She nodded, paid, and got into her car. Before she drove away, she looked at me and smiled. It wasn't flirty. It was tired, grateful, sad. Then she was gone. I told myself it was just another call, another stranger. But when I got home, the silence felt heavier than usual. A few days later, she showed up at my garage. I recognized the car immediately. She said she just wanted me to take another look, that it was probably nothing. It was nothing. The car was fine. But she stayed while I worked, asking small questions, commenting on things she didn't really understand. We talked about normal stuff. Work, weather, how busy the town gets in summer. Nothing deep. Still, something about the way she listened made it feel different. Like she wasn't waiting for her turn to talk. Like she actually heard me. She told me she'd moved back to town not long ago. That things hadn't worked out the way she thought they would. She didn't go into detail, and I didn't push. I've learned people share when they're ready, not when you ask. When I finished, she didn't rush off. She leaned against the counter, fingers wrapped around a paper cup of coffee from the machine in the corner. She said she didn't talk to many people anymore. That most days felt the same. Empty, but loud somehow. I nodded. I knew that feeling better than I wanted to admit. She thanked me again before leaving. Not just for the car. For listening. I watched her drive away and felt something shift inside me. Not hope. Not yet. Just awareness. That night, lying in bed, I realized I'd been replaying her words from the roadside. Not the sad ones. The quiet ones. The way she said them without asking for anything. I told myself to forget it. Mechanics don't fix hearts. People like me don't step into other people's pain. We stay useful. We stay detached. But the next morning, when I opened the garage, I caught myself wondering if she'd come back. And that thought scared me more than I expected. A week passed, then another. Life slipped back into its usual rhythm. Work, meals alone, evenings too quiet. I told myself I hadn't expected to see her again, but when Lily walked into the garage one morning, my chest tightened in a way I didn't like admitting. She stood near the entrance, unsure, like she wasn't certain she was allowed to be there. Same car. Same tired eyes. She said the engine light had flickered on and off. Probably nothing, she added quickly, like she didn't want to waste my time. I took the keys and checked the car. It really was nothing. A sensor acting up. 5 minutes, no charge. When I told her, she looked relieved, but also disappointed, and I realized the car hadn't been the real reason she came. She stayed anyway. We talked while I cleaned my tools. Nothing dramatic. She asked how long I'd lived here. I told her almost my whole life. She said she used to think she'd never come back to a town this small, But things change when plans fall apart. She didn't explain further. She didn't need to. There's a look people get when something ended without giving them closure. I recognized it because I'd worn it myself. She started coming by occasionally after that. Sometimes with a real question about the car. Sometimes just to say hello. I never asked why. I just accepted it. It felt easier than naming it. One afternoon, she waited until the garage was quiet. No customers. No noise except the radio playing low in the background. She told me she hadn't been in a relationship for almost a year, even though it felt longer. She said being alone wasn't the hardest part. It was feeling invisible. I didn't know how to comfort her, so I didn't try. I just listened. I nodded. I stayed present. When she finished talking, she looked at me like she was bracing for advice or judgment. I gave her neither. That sounds heavy, I said. It felt like enough. She smiled softly, like she hadn't expected even that. A few days later, she brought coffee. Not as a gesture, just casually, like it made sense for her to be there. We drank it standing up, talking about nothing important. But the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was calm. That night, I caught myself thinking about her while cooking dinner. Wondering if she'd eaten. Wondering if she'd had someone to talk to. I didn't like where my thoughts were going. Caring leads to expectations. Expectations lead to disappointment. I told myself I was just being polite. Human. Nothing more. Then she didn't show up for over a week. I noticed it immediately. The garage felt quieter. Longer days. I didn't ask about her. I didn't have anyone to ask. I told myself she'd moved on, found someone else to talk to, someone better suited to listen. When she finally came back, she looked different. Tired in a deeper way. She said she'd had a rough few days. Family stuff. Old wounds reopening. She didn't go into details, but her hands shook slightly as she held her cup. I offered her a chair. She sat. That was new. She told me she appreciated that I never pushed, that I let her talk at her own pace. She said most people either try to fix her or disappeared when she didn't get better fast enough. I'm not broken, she said quietly. I'm just tired. I felt something crack inside me then. Not open. Just shift. I told her I understood more than she probably thought. I didn't explain how. I didn't need to. When she left that day, she paused at the door and thanked me again. Not for the car. Not for the coffee. For being here, she said. After she was gone, I stood alone in the garage, realizing something I hadn't wanted to face. Somewhere between fixing her car and listening to her silence, she'd become part of my days. And I didn't know if I was ready for that. It started changing without a clear moment. No confession, no decision, just a quiet shift in how often she crossed my mind and how naturally she fit into my days. Lily began coming by not just during work hours. Sometimes in the late afternoon, when the garage was almost empty. Sometimes near closing time, when I was wiping my hands on a rag and thinking about going home to another silent evening. She never announced herself. She just showed up, like it was normal, like it made sense. One evening, she asked if I wanted to grab a coffee somewhere else. Not the machine in the corner. A real place. I hesitated longer than I should have. Not because I didn't want to, but because I hadn't done things like that in a long time. Eventually, I said yes. The cafe was small and quiet. Nothing special. We sat across from each other, cups between us, watching people pass the window. At first, the conversation stayed light. Work stories. Small complaints. Then she asked why I lived alone. I could have brushed it off. I didn't. I told her about my marriage. How it didn't explode or fall apart in a dramatic way. It just slowly emptied out. How one day I realized we were sharing a house, but not a life. I told her I learned to stop expecting things from people because it hurt less that way. She listened without interrupting. No pity. No shock. Just understanding. She told me her story after that. A long relationship that ended quietly but left a mess behind. Promises that slowly turned into distance. How she stayed longer than she should have because leaving felt like failure. When she finally did, everything felt unstable, like the ground never fully settled again. There was no moment where we reached for each other's hands. No dramatic silence. Just two people being honest in a way they hadn't been allowed to before. After that, we started spending time together outside the garage more often. Short walks. Grocery runs. Simple dinners that ended earlier than expected because neither of us wanted to push things too fast. It felt fragile, like something that could break if we named it too soon. But even without words, it was there. I noticed how I paid attention to her moods. How I could tell when she was tired before she said anything. She noticed things about me too. How I shut down when conversations got too emotional. How I used work as a shield. One night, she asked why I never talked about the future. I didn't have an answer ready. The truth was simple and ugly. I was afraid. Afraid that wanting something again would make me weak. Afraid that if I let myself care fully, I'd lose control. I told her I didn't know how to build something anymore. She didn't argue. She didn't reassure me. She just said she wasn't asking for promises. She was asking for honesty. That stayed with me. A few days later, I caught myself worrying when she didn't text back right away. The realization hit hard. I was already attached. I just hadn't admitted it yet. The tension between us grew, not in a dramatic way, but in the small pauses. The unsaid things. The moments where we almost crossed a line and pulled back instead. It was exhausting and comforting at the same time. Then came the misunderstanding. She heard from someone in town that I'd been married before and that it ended badly. The way people tell stories, small towns turn quiet endings into warnings. She asked me about it, but not directly. Her tone changed. Distant. Guarded. I noticed immediately. When I finally asked what was wrong, she admitted she was scared. Scared she was getting close to someone who might disappear emotionally the moment things became real. Scared she was repeating old patterns. I reacted poorly. Not angry, but closed. I told her maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't built for more than what we already had. The words came out colder than I meant them. She nodded. Too quickly. We didn't see each other for several days after that. The garage felt empty again. Not physically. Emotionally. I worked longer hours just to avoid going home. I replayed the conversation in my head, realizing what I'd actually done. I hadn't protected myself. I'd pushed her away before she had the chance to choose. When she finally came back, it wasn't a talk. She dropped off a small box I'd left in her car. My gloves. She didn't stay. That night, I understood something I'd been avoiding. Keeping my armor intact was costing me more than taking it off ever had. I wasn't ready to lose her. And for the first time in years, that fear felt stronger than the fear of getting hurt. The days without Lily felt longer than they should have. Not empty in a quiet way, but heavy, like everything took more effort than before. I kept busy on purpose. Extra jobs. Late evenings. Anything to avoid thinking about how easily I'd let her walk away. I told myself she needed space. That I'd done the right thing by being honest about my limits. But honesty without courage is just another excuse. I knew that. I just hadn't been ready to admit it. One evening, I closed the garage earlier than usual. The radio was off. The tools were clean. There was nothing left to fix. That's when it hit me how much of my life had been built around avoiding stillness. Stillness makes you listen to yourself. I drove past her place without planning to. I didn't stop. I just needed to know she was there. A light was on. That should have been enough. It wasn't. 2 days later, she came to the garage again. Not hesitant this time. Calm. Controlled. She asked if we could talk. I said yes before she finished the sentence. We didn't sit down. We stood near the workbench, facing each other with too much space between us. She told me she hadn't come to argue or convince me of anything. She just needed clarity. She said getting close to me felt safe in a way she hadn't expected. That scared her. And when she sensed me pulling away, it confirmed her worst fear. That she was once again choosing someone emotionally unavailable. I wanted to interrupt. I didn't. When she finished, she waited. Not for an apology. For a response that meant something. I told her the truth I hadn't said out loud before. That my marriage didn't end because of betrayal or anger, but because I slowly disappeared inside it. That I learned to survive by shutting down parts of myself. That opening up again felt like stepping into traffic without looking. I told her I wasn't distant because of her. I was distant because I didn't trust myself to handle what came after caring. She looked at me for a long moment, then asked a simple question. Do you want this? Or are you just afraid to say yes? The answer came faster than I expected. I wanted it. Not the idea of it. Not the safety of companionship. I wanted her. Her presence. Her honesty. The way she saw through me without trying to change me. I said it out loud. Slowly. Clearly. She didn't smile right away. She didn't rush toward me. She said she needed to know that trying wouldn't mean doing all the emotional work alone. I told her I couldn't promise perfection. I could promise effort. Consistency. Showing up even when it was uncomfortable. That was enough. We didn't define anything that night. No labels. No big declarations. We agreed to stop holding back out of fear and see what happened when we chose each other deliberately. Things didn't suddenly become easy. They became honest. We talked more. Sometimes clumsily. Sometimes too late in the evening. About expectations. About boundaries. About what scared us. There were moments of silence that felt awkward again, but we stayed in them instead of retreating. One night, she stayed over for dinner. Not in a romantic way. Just practical. She was tired. It was late. She didn't want to drive. We ate quietly, sharing space without pressure. That was when I realized how natural it felt. Not intense. Not overwhelming. Just real. She didn't move in. Not yet. But small signs appeared. A toothbrush. A sweater she left behind. Groceries bought together instead of separately. Things that don't announce themselves as change, but become it anyway. I started letting myself imagine a future without immediately shutting it down. Not a perfect one. A shared one. With arguments and routines and mornings that didn't feel so empty. She noticed the shift before I did. One evening, she said I seemed lighter. Less guarded. I didn't deny it. Choosing her didn't erase my past. It didn't fix everything she carried either. But it changed the direction we were walking in. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't bracing myself for loss. I was allowing myself to build something again. With her, life didn't change in one clear moment. It didn't arrive with fireworks or promises spoken out loud. It settled in quietly, through repetition, through choice, through two people deciding every day not to walk away. Lily started staying over more often. At first, it was practical. She worked late. It rained. She was tired. Then one evening, she stood in the doorway with a small suitcase and asked if she could leave it there for a while. There was no pressure in her voice. No expectation. Just honesty. I said yes without thinking. The suitcase stayed. Then came a second one. A few boxes. Clothes folded into my drawers. Her shoes by the door. Her mug next to mine in the kitchen. The house didn't feel invaded. It felt finished, like something that had been missing finally arrived. Living together wasn't perfect. It was real. We learned each other's habits fast. How she needed quiet in the mornings. How I needed time alone after work. How small things could turn into tension if left unspoken. We talked more than we ever had before. Not dramatically. Directly. There were evenings when old fears surfaced. Moments when Lily worried she was depending too much. Moments when I felt the urge to shut down instead of engage. But we didn't let those moments define us. We named them. We stayed present. That was new for both of us. She officially moved in at the start of fall. No big decision. Just a shared understanding. We told friends. Family. The people who mattered. Nobody was surprised. We made sense together in a way that didn't need explanation. My life at the garage stayed the same on the surface. Same work. Same routine. But everything felt different knowing someone was waiting at home. Lily found steady work nearby and built her own rhythm again. She wasn't leaning on me to fill her emptiness anymore. She was standing beside me, whole, choosing to share her life. Some evenings, she stopped by the garage just to say hello. She brought lunch. She listened to my stories about engines and customers. She remembered details I didn't think were important. That mattered more than I realized. One night, sitting at the kitchen table after dinner, she told me she felt like herself again. Not the person she had been before things broke, but someone stronger. Someone who trusted her own voice. She said loving me didn't feel like losing herself. That was when I knew we were building something solid. We talked about the future openly. About marriage. About children. About what kind of family we wanted. Not idealized. Honest. One built on patience and consistency. On staying even when things felt uncomfortable. Months passed. Winter came and went. We hosted holidays together. We argued sometimes. We laughed more. The house filled with memories instead of silence. One quiet Sunday morning, Lily asked me to sit with her on the couch. She didn't make a speech. She didn't cry. She handed me a small box and said she didn't need a perfect moment. She just needed certainty. Inside was a simple ring. She said she didn't want a grand gesture or a dramatic question. She wanted a life. A partner. A family built on effort, not fantasy. She wanted me, as I was. I said yes without hesitation. We didn't rush. We planned slowly. Thoughtfully. We moved forward the same way we'd built everything else. Step by step. With intention. The wedding was small. Quiet. Real. The people who mattered were there. No excess. No performance. Just commitment. Standing beside her, I realized how far we'd come from that night on the roadside. A broken car. A tired woman. A sentence spoken without hope. I never fixed her heart. She didn't fix mine either. We chose to heal together, to build something honest, to stay. Now, when I come home from the garage, the house feels alive. There is warmth. There is purpose. There is a future we are building side by side. And that is how our story ends. Not with perfection, but with love that stayed.